Hi, my name is Tunji Williams, and I'm the host of Black Founder Hour. I'm so looking forward to releasing this week's episode. I get to sit down with my good friend Dezbee McDaniel, who's the co-founder and head of business development for a company called Clinispan Health, based in North Carolina. I really enjoy speaking with Dezbee because he's one of the most thoughtful people I know. He's also a truly gifted and brilliant entrepreneur. Don't take my word for it. I think you'll find out for your own when you watch this episode. Dezbee and I talk about his entrepreneurial journey. We also talk about what it was like growing up with a single father in rural North Carolina and how that plays a role in motivating him today and every day. This is a great conversation. I really think you're going to fall in love with Dezbee.
Hey Dez, how's it going, man?
Pretty good, Tunji. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Can't complain. Another day, living, breathing.
Yep.
It's sunny outside. I'm outside. I'm happy. Thanks for making time for this. I appreciate it. I know how busy you are.
Of course, man. Of course. Yeah, I'll always make time for
you. I guess I'll start there. I mean, you and I go back a little bit.
Yeah.
This isn't our first conversation. We met for the first time, I think, back in 2017 in Baltimore.
Yep.
Right. Why were you in Baltimore back then? I know the answer to that. But.
Yeah, I was in a fellowship called Venture for America, and the premise of it is you work in a startup company over the course of 2 years. It could be multiple companies. That was my experience, but I was working with a company called Snag a Slip that did online boat slip rentals, and so that was the company I was working for in Baltimore. And I remember the day. I remember the day that we actually spoke and connected, and you were just like, yeah, I see another young black man in this building, and I'm just like, he has to know something or something to be here in this space, in this environment. And that was enough. But us both being in the same environment was enough for us to have this connection that has brought us here. And, who knows where in the future. So that has been a great moment for me. Like, that's the most memorable thing for me from Baltimore.
That's saying a lot. I appreciate that, man. And I honestly feel grateful to know you and have crossed paths with you. And I don't say that lightly. I was telling you before we jumped on that my wife Victoria and I were watching one of your recent interviews this morning and thinking, my goodness, this man has got to be one of the top 1% of entrepreneurs anywhere. I don't say that lightly.
I appreciate that.
And I've spent a lot of time studying game tape, just looking at lots of different entrepreneurs trying to get better. And the way you talk about your business, the way you talk about yourself, the way you communicate messages is just unbelievable. And I know from the conversations I've had with you that you're a brilliant business mind. So I'm glad to kind of let folks into one of our chats and just hopefully get the world a better idea of who you are and why I think that you're going to be a breakout star in the world of entrepreneurship. Speaking of that last interview, at the end of that interview, the interviewer asked you, like, what 2 pieces of wisdom or nuggets would you leave with folks who are thinking about getting into entrepreneurship? And the first one struck me, man, because it's like at the heart of everything, I think, so much of what we talk about. And you said, you got to know who you are. So I'm going to start there and just ask you, Dezbee McDaniel, who are you? Who are you?
Who am I? I honestly, like, I won't lie, I do not like that question, man, because it's like, as an entrepreneur, I feel like I identify as different things at different moments, as even like with my consulting business, when I would work with a different client, like at that moment, I'm someone different, like I might be a marketing manager for one, and then I might be a fundraising manager for another. And so that's kind of even how I think about myself, is like, I'm just a walking tool and I'm kind of like a Swiss Army knife. I am what I need to be at that moment. As far as just like identification goes, but who I am, as far as socially, I come from Eden, North Carolina, small rural place. Not very many people there. I feel like wasn't exposed to very much. I was in a low income community, grew up with a lot of struggles. Ended up going to college at UNC Chapel Hill, and I ended up having a full need-based scholarship. And so that was very much a blessing for me. It was either that or play Division II college basketball somewhere for like a half academic scholarship. And so I had to make my choice there. I'd always envisioned myself being like a, professional basketball player, I would say, as far as just the NBA, as far as my goal and dreams as a younger kid. I feel like, being honest, in lower income areas, I feel like there's kind of some standard dreams, if I had to say, as far as like a kid having an NBA or, being a rapper artist and just kind of boxing ourselves in as far as just like what we feel we're capable of. And so that's a lot of what I carried with me to college. I feel like was feeling like, I had to identify now in a different way. I wasn't a basketball player anymore. I wasn't an athlete. I had to learn to identify in different ways. And so I feel like that's why a lot of what I talk about is based in personal development and how you identify, because I've been dealing with that my whole life. And, I feel like college was the hugest transition for me as far as going from the way I identified before that to now identifying as just a student, who focused only on academics, who, had to use different skills that weren't my sports talents. And that was kind of like an interesting growth period for me in college and, just learning to become an entrepreneur. So I went into the entrepreneurship minor at UNC and did a lot of practical things. Like those classes were practical versus me just reading a book and studying a case study. I would read about things in a book, but then I would go execute them. I would go do market research. I would go interview students on campus to ask them about a potential problem that I think they're having and come up with a solution, and then interview them with the solution and see how they used it and looked at user experience. Like all of that are things I learned in the entrepreneurship minor that I had never been exposed to before. And it developed my mindset in such a different way. And that's really when Entrepreneur Dez was born, where I was like, wow, like I am an entrepreneur. I am creative. I am an innovator. I can solve problems. Like that was the one thing I feel like to we've talked about levels of abstraction. And when I zoom out, at its core, entrepreneurs are problem solvers. I've solved problems before, so why can't I be an entrepreneur? So being able to zoom out and look at things from that standpoint made me feel stronger in identifying this way, and that's when imposter syndrome, like I don't have imposter syndrome anymore. Like that does not creep on me at all. Like I'll hardly ever, honestly, I don't have time to feel imposter syndrome because I got goals to hit and I have to use every second of my day to get towards them. So I don't even have time to let imposter syndrome creep in. But yeah, just like reframing my perspective was the first thing that I would say equipped me to be able to be here today with you, speaking with you on this interview, because, my mindset before was very, we've talked about this, how I talk about kind of creator versus consumer. My mindset was very consumerist. It was very much focused on leveraging like cash flow and leveraging money to buy things that didn't necessarily make me more money. They were more material consumer things. Versus when I went through my growth period in college, I started to think more like a creator. I started to think even differently about how to leverage like cash flow, leveraging debt. I feel like where I'm from in my community, people talk about using credit cards to put things on layaway, for example, versus, as a business owner, you talk about leveraging credit to give you runway time until you can generate more cash flow to keep the business going. So it's like, even the way that you discussed the concept of credit, like that for me was way different after my mindset grew. And so, just all of those things, like they seem so small after you have grown to that point. They seem so small. But when you think about it, before you knew that, I mean, for me at least, before I knew some of these things and before my mindset was framed the way it was, like, I just feel like I was not as nearly empowered, like in a general sense, even empowered to, I guess, get a job, even as much as to create my own project or company. So yeah, just through college is where I really learned to be an entrepreneur and really felt confident in how my mindset has now been framed. And once I built a mindset, that's when I started paying attention to skill set. And I started to, because I realized like a good entrepreneur can identify whatever skills they have frame their mindset the right way, pair those together to build something of value for others. So for me, I had gotten my mindset developed. So now it's like, okay, what are the skills that I have? And for me, I always felt like, you know, the way I've viewed myself, I've been good at a lot of things, not great at anything. You know, if I had to say there are 10 things I'm good at and I'm not great at any of them, versus like some people are great at one or two things and not necessarily good at, you know, an assortment of things. So for me, I feel like I had to pinpoint skills that I was good at that I then wanted to develop to be greater at. And I feel like really, I would say marketing, communication, oriented kind of skill sets, and sales. I would say sales, marketing, and business development are kind of like my skills. That's where I thrive. I feel like I thrive on understanding a customer base, you know, researching and understanding a customer base and revealing insights about that customer base, leveraging those insights to figure out how to deploy products and services to that customer base. You know, coming up with revenue strategies around your users, you know, how to turn them into, you know, 2-time or 3-time or repeat customers. Different challenges like that are the challenges I like to address and that I'm good at addressing and reaching goals as it relates to those. So those are the skill sets that I've now identified as my skills. You know, I have other skills, but if someone was to ask me the highest priority skills I have, the highest value skills I have, marketing, sales, and business development would be those. And those skills, along with my developed mindset, has gotten me where I'm at today. You know, just as far as like what I also realized is you can sit and read, study, and I realize I'm getting far away from the who am I question. So I do apologize.
No, but you're heading in the right direction, Des.
Yeah, but as far as just like I realized, man, I can ideate all day. I can read about other stories all day, but that is not me executing my journey. And so I, at a point, I would say, had to realize like I'm over educating myself. And I hate to say that because it's crazy to say you can be over educated, but I realized that the time I was spending continuing to educate myself at a certain threshold was then not as valuable as just now acting on the education I had already given myself.
Diminishing
so
returns.
Once I got to a certain point where I felt like, okay, I'm educated enough, you know, to know what I'm doing when I make these moves. Now it's time to make moves and learn as I do. And so that's where I've been in my journey now, is I've been executing. I would say, you know, I did a lot of watching interviews and on like Jay-Z, Robert F. Smith, even some Nipsey Hussle, I would say, like watching interviews and learning from those people about their journeys. And just at a certain point, what I realized is I now have these knowledge points in my head, but knowledge is nothing if you don't know how to apply it. And so that is where I realized I now have to apply this knowledge. And in applying that knowledge, I learned so much more than I did ever watching an interview with anyone. Usually I would just learn about how to address that particular situation in that context of my own journey. And then I also would learn personally about myself, about how I even navigate these things. And you know, how I feel when I do these things, how I make my decisions. That's a lot of what it is in the execution of it. I learn things about myself that I don't learn when I read about someone else's execution of this same thing. Because the way that you go about hitting say we have the same goal, right? The way you go about hitting that goal is going to be different than the way I go about hitting that goal, you know, and I can inform the way I go about hitting that goal from your journey, but mine is not going to go exactly as yours. So even if I pull out 2 principles from yours and apply it to mine, it's still going to shake out differently on my end, literally because I'm a different variable. So it's just kind of like a scientific formula type deal. You know, I'm a different variable, so the outcome is going to be different. And so, yeah, that's kind of, I feel like how I've thought about that. Honestly,
I should have known asking you an open-ended question like that, I was going to get a thoughtful answer. You're one of those. Yeah. You're one of those people I talk to who seems to have thought about almost everything we talk about before.
Man, I spent so much time like pondering on my own perspective on things. Like, it's honestly almost embarrassing maybe to tell how much time I'm spending doing that.
No, I think, you know, an examined life is one worth living. I guess I don't want us to get too far adrift or too far down the stream without kind of introducing you to folks who don't know, what it is you do now, right?
Yep.
Where in your entrepreneurial journey are you now, and how are you creating value in the world? So can you just kind of give us a view on what it is you are doing at this moment?
Sure. So I guess I don't generally go to naming accolades, but just a few, I guess, to name. I've been a Forbes Fellow in 2018, named a Forbes Fellow, recognized as a top 25 under 25 entrepreneur contributing to the Charlotte area. So those are just, I guess, a few of the accolades. As far as what I'm working on a company called Clinispan Health, and Clinispan Health is a software platform that is diversifying clinical trial recruitment. So the problem that myself and my partner noticed was people that look like you and me are not involved in the drug development process at an efficient rate, right? So they're generally middle-aged white men who are involved in clinical trials. And so when they're in the clinical trials, the drug that they're testing, let's even use ibuprofen as an example, ibuprofen trials. Middle-aged white men getting in those trials, they are, let's say, 80% of who are in the trial. So when that drug is produced, the efficiency of how it affects people is going to be more closely related to a middle-aged white man, because that's who the drug was studied on. So when you take that, you're going to take improper dosage amounts and you're going to see inadvertent side effects, meaning overall a lower health state, because there weren't enough people like us involved in the drug development process. And the thing we noticed with this really is that there's a lack of trust from people that look like us in the healthcare system, because we've been mistreated in the past. The Tuskegee experiment is something that comes up in every conversation. But my thing is, while I could see maybe us not being involved in the drug development process, if we didn't still end up taking those drugs, that's my biggest thing, is while we're not in that drug development process, we still end up taking those drugs once they're developed. So we're doing ourselves a complete disservice by not being involved. So that's really the hugest proponent for me internally as to why we need more of us involved, because we still are going to take the drug once it's developed. It's not like we opt out of both parts of the process. We're only opting out of one part, which then makes the second part worse off for us. So we're really focused on trying to get more of us involved in that step one, getting more Black people and other people of color, Hispanic, Native American, people in rural areas, women involved in the drug development process, so that as these drugs are given to a particular group, the efficiency will just be there, where we know that you will take a proper dosage amount, an exact dosage amount for a African-American male, and then there will be an exact dosage amount for a African-American female, a white female, a white male. Like for each particular group, you can then identify what dosage amount they should take, what side effects they might see, because it's going to vary. I mean, it's basically like targeted marketing. You have to target the drug to that specific market. So you have to test the drug with that specific market before you roll it out to them. So that's really what we're working on. And I think that is a hugely impactful problem.
Wow.
I feel like that was kind of one of the things in my last business that wasn't there for me. So my last business, Everywhere I Had, you were one of my advisors for. We were doing ads in the back of Ubers and Lyfts, and we were trying to help small businesses do better marketing. And small businesses need to survive too. Small businesses need assistance too. They need problems to be solved as well. But for me, solving a health problem of a particular group of people that I clearly identify with is much more impactful. This is physical bodily health that we're affecting, not the health of some entity that, if it wasn't in existence, the people would still be able to eat and get by every day and self-actualize outside of that business. But here, if we don't address this, people don't get the chance necessarily self-actualize, because their health states aren't going to be in the way that they need. And we know health is wealth. And so that really is why, my heart and my head is just more into this business, because I really realized that, for me personally, the impact is just so much higher.
And you speak with a sense of urgency that kind of lets me know that you're in soul mission alignment, which is, I think that's like a state of flow that's very difficult, I think, to realize as an entrepreneur. And when you do, it's like catching lightning in a bottle, and you kind of just got to go with it. I'm curious about this business. I want to understand kind of the economics of the business. How does this work? Who are your stakeholders? How do you guys make money? What does a growth story look like for Clinispan?
Yep. So our stakeholders are pharma and CRO companies, and then nonprofits, and then nonprofit constituents are our three stakeholders.
Okay.
So with namely contract organizations that manage clinical trials. So we work with them to basically hire us as a recruitment partner for their trials that they manage recruitment for. So those are our customers. So they will pay us per person that we enroll, that we refer and enroll into a clinical trial of theirs.
Got it.
So then once we are paid by that CRO company, we will then, so the nonprofit, so this is our user acquisition and patient acquisition strategy. So we then partner with nonprofits on the other side. Nonprofits agree to send out emails and other social media messages to their constituents about our studies for them to be educated and enroll into the studies. So as each person is enrolled into a study, the CRO pays us, and then we will share a portion of revenue as a donation to the nonprofit partner that the constituent originated from.
Got it. Got it.
And so that's how our business model works.
Got it. Okay. So it's a business to business to consumer model.
Yes, B2B to C, exactly.
Got it. Excellent. Okay. So this it strikes me as kind of like a healthcare marketing play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the way we like to think of it is, if you ever went and looked, in general, it's not easy to access a clinical trial. It should be super easy for you and I and anyone else in the world to be able to, how we can one click button on an app with anything. We can't do that with clinical trials. So that's the thing. We're trying to make clinical trials easily accessible to the average person. But for us, we like to think of us as the first patient database for people of color interested in medical research. That is what we're building. We're building the first patient database for people of color who are interested in being involved in medical research. And so that's why I think we're hugely impactful, because there is no database really in general where you can have easy access to clinical trials. But then when you
it's not consolidated, right? Because it's disaggregated. All the various companies have their own, but there's not one consolidated. Got it.
Exactly. And then if you look at a more particular group of people who are generally left out of trials, that the access is even that much harder, I feel like we're trying to make it that much easier on that particular group of people. And so that's really why I'm just so, like, as you can tell, just so bought into this, because I really see the impact, like 5-10 years down the road. You know, we have millions of people of color who have registered themselves in our database to be involved in medical research in the future. And so that's the vision for us.
Des, is this a global business, or what do you see as your geographic scope? Like, in-state?
So I do see a global kind of market for us. So we actually have already had, so we were speaking with Merck at one point, EMD Serrano / Merck. They're one of the subsidiaries of Merck. And we were talking about deploying us potentially in the US, and their German office was in the meeting, and they asked, like, yeah, when can we get this in Europe? And so we were telling them about our processes and the way we do things. And she was just like, this would be so great in Europe. And so we have literally already gotten, questions about potentially doing business with other companies. There's a company called BuzzReach in Japan that we're potentially partnering with to do their recruitment in the US. And so literally Japan, Europe, like, we've gotten inquiries already from other countries. I wasn't thinking about
the supply side of the market. I was even thinking about patients, but you're right. You got manufacturers in other countries that want to know about populations here, of course.
Yep. So that's one way. And then to your point, we also do plan to, like, I would say the supply Budge Reach, as far as like us supplying them with patients in the US. The Europe one was, to your point, us actually doing international recruiting in Europe. So really both, like both angles we've had questions about. And so we definitely plan to grow in both ways, I would say. It probably would most likely be that we would do the kind of supply first, where an international company might work with us to help with their US markets. That probably would be the initial way. But we also do plan to grow. I would say once we have more standard processes and standard ways of recruiting and more mappable, where we know XYZ is going to produce, this much in recruitment activity. I think once we get there, and then we can maybe try to deploy internationally as far as the actual recruitment efforts.
Gotcha. And you're currently kind of experimenting your way to that kind of predictability.
Yeah, for sure. So we have, I would say there are steps in the process that we know should be the way they are, just based on early success. And then there are still parts of the process, I would say, that we're just exploring and kind of doing creative things. And I would say putting some feelers out and kind of analyzing and responding. And that's kind of how we're doing it, putting out, an idea, seeing how people resonate, analyzing that, iterating, doing it again. So that's kind of where we are. So I would say, if there were 5 steps in the process, we know probably 3 of them. And then the last 2, we're trying to figure out those as far as kind of from a funnel perspective.
I know the way you work, and I know how disciplined and structured your thinking is, around business operations. So I know when you say you've got 60% of the process figured out, you're being humble. And I think that's a good segue into kind of my next question, which is, I think one of the things that strikes me about you as a person, as a leader, is like the humility with which you seem to approach conversations and questions in life and in business. And I'm curious, generally that doesn't come to a young person naturally, is generally through experience. And I wonder, has life humbled you in a way that you'd be willing to share? Or is that just kind of like a divine gift that you have, you think?
I think that's a 2-part question, a 2-part answer rather. And I think it's a little bit of both. I think when you talk about kind of like the natural part of that, I think my dad, so I really grew up like my dad as a single dad, him raising my sister and I, and my parents had me when they were teenagers. Most people, if I was to tell the story of the origin of my life, I feel like you would not guess that I would end up where I am today. So yeah, I was born to teen parents, and that's not even something I talk about often, honestly. But yeah, so my dad, I feel like, is just a very humble person. And I have a lot of respect for that. I seen him struggling a lot as I was growing up. And I feel like we as a family, him, my sister, myself, we were really focused because we had to be. I feel like there wasn't very much time for just kind of like the term to use, I guess, just playing around. It wasn't very much time for that. I remember us living with my aunts for a while, moving from home to home, heater being off, heat not working, and him, he literally would wake my sister up and then wake me up. Like he would go sit her in front of the stove so she could be warm before she started to get ready for school. And then, he would pick me up, go do the same thing. I would sit at the heater while my sister's or sit at the stove while my sister was in the bathroom. And then I would go to the bathroom, and like he would just be kind of like freezing, So those are kind of thoughts I have that from an early age, my family, we had to be on one accord. We had to be there for each other, because if we didn't have anything. And so I feel like that's translated really to who I am today as a person, is knowing that like at any moment, the rug can be pulled from under you, knowing that I need others at any moment. So I always show gratitude because I know I need people at any moment. Like, I need you. I need you, even if it's just to have a conversation, and the energy that I can get from you. Like, I need that. So, I always try to keep it humble, just because I know that, no matter where I go, somebody helped me get there. And these are things that my dad talked to me about that framed my mindset from an early age, I think, to be able to kind of just have the the way of carrying myself the way I do, and the way of understanding, the world the way I do. And so that's the main thing. And a little bit of that, like I said, was just part of the experience with my dad. So him, I would say, nurturing me, and then just literally what we were going through as he was nurturing me. I think I described it a little bit there. My mom, she, we have a good relationship today, but, back then, she kind of like stepped out in our family as far as just like she had her own vision for herself. And I think that internally for me as a young boy did a lot. It made me feel like if the person that I came out of, I felt not loved by her. And so I feel like for me early on, I felt like I stayed focused because I focused on what I can control. My dad taught me to focus on what I can control, and I couldn't control her. I couldn't control how she viewed me or how she viewed the world or anything. So I feel like early on for me, even focusing on sports and getting my family basically out of the hood was my focus, and putting my energy into that helped me kind of get past the pain that I felt as it related to my mother, and really as it relates to anything else. But I would say that was the main pain that I remember as a young boy that molded who I am early. Like, I feel like I leveraged that to push myself to reach my goals, because reaching my goals made me feel better about whatever pain was being caused, to me. And so I would say, I guess one anecdote, that's pretty much, I feel like, what shapes who I am today. And like I said, as I think about it now, I feel like I'm still that same young boy who, things happen to me like everybody else, and I go through pain like everybody else, but I try to focus on my goals and where I'm going, because, that's what I can control, I do feel I'm more emotionally intelligent today than, growing up. Part of that was me growing to be emotionally intelligent. So I feel like when I was younger, I would kind of ignore my feelings and kind of displace them and keep working despite how I felt, versus now I feel like I leverage my feelings to push me forward. So I feel like I take time to analyze how I feel and understand how I feel and what's triggering how I feel. And once I fully understand it, I'm like, how can I now take what I understand here and use it to get me to my next goal and leverage it? So that's kind of how I look at it now. And that's I think the difference in me and the young Dez is that I'm more emotionally intelligent, and that I can now leverage those feelings for progress, versus feeling like I had to displace those feelings and ignore those feelings because they would, could potentially drum up negativity, versus, I guess, looking at it, I try to look at it and reframe it in a positive way. And I feel like, honestly, as an entrepreneur, that's kind of something I generally try to do, because otherwise I will kind of be in a mentally disdainful state at any moment.
I feel you on that. Yeah.
So I that was a little vulnerable, I guess, but like I said, I feel like it's important. It's important, I think, to be vulnerable in things like this. I feel like people aren't vulnerable enough. I feel like people give you the surface level stuff, and they don't give you what's behind it. And for me, it's really important to just give a little bit of what's kind of behind the curtain.
And thank you. I think, the glimpse into your operating system, what I call your operating system, there is a reminder for me of why, like, understanding the founder, understanding the entrepreneur is way more important than understanding the business, because those vehicles are ephemeral. But a founder with a constitution that is the result of learned lessons, and with the skill set to put those learnings into operation in the world, is highly investable.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Agreed.
So I think shifting kind of out from the heavens back into our world, I guess the world of tech entrepreneurship, I think we tend to under-index the value of wisdom, and over-index the value of knowledge, contemporary knowledge.
Yep.
And the way you talk about your father, and the way he kind of kept your family together and took care of you down to the specifics, the stove work in the morning with the 2 children. That's a man that has wisdom beyond himself.
Yes.
That's him as a teenager. And that's a model for you. So I just wonder, what does he think of you now? What does he think of your life? Like, what is, when he looks at you, when you talk to him and you get feedback, what does he think about you?
Man, I wish he could be on here to answer that for you. But man, he is ecstatic. He is ecstatic. I feel like, you know, he tells me all the time, like even people like back home that I went to high school with and stuff, he gets just compliments all the time. Like another thing he told me growing up is I'm a reflection of him, that when I'm out in the community doing things, like people are gonna come back and tell him about that, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, they're gonna mention it. And so I think he would be proud to tell you that probably almost, you know, 90% of things that people tell him about me are positive, and that they make him smile and they make him feel proud. And that's what I think he would say. And even, man, he just bought a house, and he would literally tell you, like he tells me, he's told me multiple times the past couple of weeks because he's been so excited how impactful I was in helping him buy a home because of the way he viewed it. You know, I remember literally growing up, like he would tell me, you know, like that maybe renting was better than owning. And this was his context, his situation. It was better maybe because he couldn't be responsible for the things breaking around the house and maybe didn't have everything he needed to get the mortgage and all of that. So I realized like he was educating me from a contextual standpoint of what he knew to be best.
Of course.
And so I talked to him recently. He got married. He and his wife were looking to move. They were in an apartment. They were going to move to another apartment. I was like, do you really want to do that? Like, you're going to be paying probably more in rent than you would in a mortgage and not investing in the future. So in the short term, you'll be losing. In the long term, you'll be losing. And kind of like it grew his perspective on that. And he now has a house. He just bought a house. Him and his wife just bought a house. And he tells me every time I come up there, son, thank you so much for growing my perspective. Like, you are a big reason why we own this house. And he tells me that. So that microcosmic example of how I influence him, I think would really show you our relationship kind of across the board. Even down to, man, so I was technically a first generation college student, and I got my degree in 2017. My dad had enrolled online at Fayetteville State University probably my sophomore year. He got his degree 2016. I followed up on mine 2017. So I'm in Kappa Alpha Psi. I joined in 2016. My dad joined grad chapter in 2018. I was spring 16, he was spring 18. So our relationship is strong. Our relationship pushes me. Our relationship pushes him. And so I think all of these things I'm telling you are things that he would be ecstatic to tell you. And our relationship has fueled me more than like anything. Like, our relationship is the #1 motivating factor for me, honestly. To your point, just seeing him struggle the way he did as I was growing up, to be able to take care of my sister and myself the way he did and investing in us. And man, like, one story I want to tell real quick is just, man, one day he was enrolled at University of Phoenix. I think I was in middle school, I think maybe 9th grade or so, going to 9th grade. So it was about 2008, maybe 2009. I came in and like I said, I was huge into sports. I came in asking him to like go play catch with me. And he was doing schoolwork. He was like, you know, I'll do it later. Like, can't do it right now, doing schoolwork. And I think he told me this story, which is why I know. He was like, he saw my face and how impacted I was, how sad that made me, really, that we couldn't go play catch. And he realized he was choosing schoolwork and investing in himself over me. And he told me like a week later, he had dropped out of the University of Phoenix because he said that it was not his time to invest in himself. It was time for him to invest in my sister and myself. And that investing in us and our futures was more important at that moment than investing in his own education. Those are moments that make me who I am. I am strong in my convictions because of stories like that. I will never, ever, 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 ever in my life let my dad down because of stuff like that. Those are moments that he acted in a way that showed the principles that he lives by, the principles that guide him. And I am guided by the same principles and with the same conviction. And so, like, those are the things that shape me. Those are the things that make me so driven and so urgent, because I can never let up. Because my dad never let up. He never let up. And I will never forget moments like that. And so I just want to share that because, man, when he told me that, like, I was really just in tears. Like, I'm fighting them now. Like, I feel like you don't hear impactful stories like that every day. Like that's not something that's normal, that a child, that a parent like recognizes that and acts in that way for their kid. Like it's just so abnormal. It's so abnormal. And so it just means so much to me. It means so much to me. And I think moments like that, like thinking on things like that, are how I keep myself disciplined and focused.
All with a smile, Des. Whoa. Yeah. Yeah. My mom taught me not to ruin a good thing by saying it twice and speaking over it. So I'm just going to leave that. But I do want to honor what you just did, which is something that I think that as a community, Black people around the world, we have to do more, because I think our traditions historically are so oral in terms of passing down knowledge and wisdom. And the world we live in is so document based, right, and digital. We have to take time to honor our forebearers and tell the world, tell each other what they gave us, right? The way we do that, whether it's through conversations like this or in content and blogs, whatever it is, we have to honor. We can't let that evaporate just because they didn't go to the fancy schools we went to or whatever it is, right? That we're judge value, the way we judge value today. Like what you described just now brings tears. You know, I cry quick, but that just fills me with love. Des, I know you got a new.
I'm so glad, man.
Sorry, you're gonna say something.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I'm so glad, man. Like to your point, I tell my dad all the time, like I want to talk about him as much as I can. Like when people want to learn about me, like I'm gonna point to him because I am because of him. Like that's what I tell him all the time. Like I can't tell my story without telling him and his story.
It's not possible.
Like my story is because of his story. So to that point, like I always insert him into things because like literally all of the questions that people ask me about why I am the way I am or how did I get there, I could always point back somehow to my dad and the origin of a conversation that he had with me or a concept that he taught me or a principle that I saw him act on. And yeah, it brings me joy, you know, to be able to share his story and have it create an impact that he doesn't even know is being created.
And that's life right there. And I love the wisdom that you displayed by saying that you recognizing that your dad gave you the best of what he had from his perspective, and like that comes out quick, but that's got to sink in, because I think as we advance, because of the investments and the sacrifices they made, we have to recognize that some of what they give us isn't necessarily right for us, and also have a sense of empathy and gratitude, knowing that what they gave us was everything they had.
Everything
and it's like
that could give us.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think about it all the time too, that if he hadn't done things the way he did, I wouldn't be who I am. And so I walk back all the time like, wow, I wish he'd have done maybe this different or that different. But I'm like, well, if he had, who knows where I would be. It might not be today, and I love where I'm at. And so that makes me appreciate everything for what it was, honestly.
Des, I know you've got a noon meeting, and I know that type of person you are, you would talk into your noon meeting to finish this out for me, and I appreciate that. I just want for folks who don't know you yet, can you just let them know where they can find you and be in touch, and what you're doing now, the basis upon which they can reach out if they're interested.
Yep. So Clinispan Health is a company I'm working on, software platform to diversify clinical trials, get more Black people, Hispanics, and other people of color into clinical trials. You can email me at Dezbee, Dezbee at clinispanhealth.com. You also can find me on LinkedIn if you search Dezbee McDaniel. That's Dezbee McDaniel. And those are probably the two primary ways to get in touch with me best.
Excellent. And we'll have, Dezbee's information in the show captions. And just really excited to kind of chat with Dezbee like we try to do at least once a month, just in front of everybody, because I think he really is one of the great entrepreneurial minds that I've come across. And I think that the world will know it sooner rather than later for all of our benefit. Thanks for just giving us kind of a glimpse into how you think and what's driving you, man. Have a great one today. Yeah.
Of course, man. Of course.
All
Thank
right.
you for having me.
Amen. Take care.
All right, man. See you.